I think that the reason I'm calling flexibility and what I want to talk to you all about is the continuation of what we started talking about with the faculty forum, about how to make a better contact between your inner voice and how to assist you, or how maybe I can help give you some guidelines so that you can make your own interpretations. The reason I went interpretations is because, you don't make just one interpretation. That's a kind of a difficulty, and maybe one of the big drawbacks to studying with a teacher, one teacher, for however long, because, we all love or have loved our teachers, and the whole idea, the way it works is, the teacher is the television set, and you're watching the television, and then you try out what the television tells you to do, and then you get another instruction. So, yeah, it's a little bit like monkey see, monkey do, and that's actually a really great way to learn, because you learn a lot about sound and style and everything that goes in, harmony theory. But at some point, that's not good enough, because you don't learn how to do that on your own. So I've been thinking a lot about this actually since the end of the festival in 2019, when I was informed by one of the most gifted people here, after we struggled with this subject for 3 weeks, that she still didn't have a clear idea about how to go about making her own interpretation. So I wanted to share with you, before I see if I can help you all with this, a little experience that I had which got me thinking about it in a different way, and that is, a few months ago I had a surgery, and the surgery went a little longer than anticipated, and something happened in the surgery that was unexpected, which was my heart stopped and I flatlined for 30 seconds. And then, well, here I am. So then they used the defibrillator and some other things, and my heart started up. It seems to be working fine. And but when I came out of the anesthesia, the surgeon said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Oh, I feel like I've had a consciousness change. That something changed for me." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, surgery was successful." And he told me, didn't tell me exactly that I flatlined, but he told me they had to use the defibrillator and blah, blah, blah. But when you have surgery, you have pain, and so I wasn't aware of the details, which is good, because I would have freaked out. Then I got to, when I found out the details, it's kind of made a little bit more sense to me, because very often I think when the lights go out, let's put it that way, then there is nothing. You don't know how long. I have no idea how long the surgery was, or how long. I don't have a sense of how long my heart stopped. I only know that I had some kind of a reset, and I feel a little bit different emotionally. I feel a little bit different about my life. I certainly never thought about death until very recently, until this happened. So it kind of gave me the opportunity to come up with this idea that, we sort of, when we create our reality, or when we create our vision or our interpretation, it's a little bit like creating a fantasy, and it's a two-way street. In other words, it should be. We shouldn't be like looking at the television when we look at our teacher. So if we're doing it on our own, so our consciousness is made up of the outside world, right? Like I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. But there's also stuff on the inside that's going on, because we receive light. And so that's churning around too, and that makes for us, inside ourselves, a kind of a collective experience. It's a combination of our guesses and all combined of what our life has been, I'm talking about not former life, but this life, our experience. And that's how we accumulate information about like how to play Beethoven, the sounds of Beethoven, the sounds of Chopin, or whatever. And that goes around at the same time while we're gathering new information. So, you know, when I think about it, I think now, after having had this experience, that you all, speaking in a very general way, not knowing you very well, just as a suggestion, that you need to kind of go inside yourself when you go into the practice room and create maybe what Chopin would say, or other composers have said, and Brahms certainly even wrote this, that he went into a kind of a trance. He went into, some people call it an altered state. We know some people take drugs. I'm not talking about taking drugs to do this. I'm talking about going into your inner place where you, I mean, I know that you've all had fantasies, like fantasy of going to Italy, or maybe a fantasy of, well, we just had one back at the kitchen about having pasta in Italy because it's so good. But, you know, you can conjure up these images, and you can do that at the piano. I think for most of you, it doesn't happen because somewhere in the process you get stuck. And you're busy doing either what your teacher says, or you're busy practicing in a kind of a habitual way, and you're not able to, what you could call, heighten your awareness, or take yourself further down this fantasy. So I wanted to share the most important part, first of all, is to remain flexible. So what does that mean? Well, one way to, if you're flexible, then you can change the component parts of your, the way you're playing any piece. So I'm not sure that you have a clear picture of parts that are easily, you could say, you know, software that easily comes out and you can put new software in. My best guess is that you're all a little bit not sure what to do. So during the pandemic, you know, in the isolation months, I wrote this little virtual book called Chicken Soup for Pianists. And it was, it's a simple book of prose and little videos. And it's sort of designed to give you some tips, or anybody some tips. So what are ways that you can change an interpretation? Do you have any set go-to places? So I have some suggestions to do that. So one of the things is, you know, you probably, when you're playing a piece, you're sort of, no, I'm not talking about the stages where you're learning notes. I'm talking like after you can sort of play it with the music, or part of it, you know what I mean? Maybe before you memorize it, or even if you have memorized it. So let's take, you know, if you take something like, this is the slow movement of Bach Rosoli. Which allows, that means freedom. That's the underlying right message there. So you can do, if I wanted to play it more. So this is much more Baroque style, right? I changed the pedal. So they're like basic things that you almost can write them down on a little card and experiment with yourself. And when you try something out, you have to try it in you have to make it really obvious to yourself so that you can hear a big change. So we're not talking about that it's necessarily going to be the change or the way, because I can tell you that there is no the right way to play anything. I mean, it's always changing. Like life is changing, like every day is different. So if I did this way, for instance, I can double dot. Right? So you probably have heard this. Right? So that's like, I'm changing the rhythm, I'm changing the pedal. So if I do something that's like more obvious piano, so if I want to play it, let's say more in piano, modern piano style, I can play it this way. So that's, right, that's obviously modern piano style. I'm not even actually going to tell you what I would do or what I wouldn't do, because it's not important. The subject is, you know, like you're walking out into a garden and you have to decide what flowers you're going to pick at that moment for that day or whatever, and the next day you can go out and pick some different flowers. They don't last very long. And interpretations are always changing. So maybe jewelry that goes in, the more the tempo has to be held up a little bit, because it takes time to do the ornaments, and also the idea of the ornaments is to sustain the sound, right? So these are all like, you have to make the basic decision of, the reason I started with Bach is because it's easier to hear, because are you going to play it with pedal, without pedal? Are you going to play it legato? Are you going to play it more staccato? Are you going to use Baroque ornamentation? Are you going to use no ornamentation? You know, I mean, there's these basic blocks that you can, so if I play this, this is the slow movement. So this is modern style. Get on a bus, and you have to stay on that bus for at least, like 16 bars before you decide, oh, I don't like this bus, I'm going to get off. Because 1 bar or 2 bars won't do that. So, while we're talking about this, another big is breathing. This is one breath. Dramatically, where you choose to be. If I breathe here, so you can see how you hear how the phrasing changes. It's shorter groups. So that's something that is really important to do, because that changes the piece dramatically. So you have, your breath, you have your tactile feeling. Like tactile feeling is, the touch. legato manner. So, there's lots of ways that you could do that. And like, for instance, changing the dynamics, right? So you can't start out with a pre-plan. You have to start out by saying, I'm going to break up my habit. And that's what teachers do. Well, that's what I do. I mean, I feel like my job is to help anybody that I'm teaching make a different way of playing. So if I say, for instance, going to, let's say, so let's just use this. Change that. Different things. Some of the things you're going to like, some of the things you're going to not like, but it's so important. So, you have to, I listen, I try anyway to put together a faculty of really special and unique personalities here as guest teachers that come in. And also just people of different ages, because people of different ages, like my memories go back, I don't know, I guess they go back over 60 years. It's like a long time. We were just talking at lunch that, I remember Bloomington before all of the malls were built. There was nothing in Bloomington, just a little square, so that's in a way interesting when you put the old people together with the young people, because you have different performance perspectives and you have different ideas. And it's this, I think that my, since it's my festival, so it's my decision. I think it's this mishmash of the old and the new that's so important for you all to go forward, because the colors are different. Things go in and out of style. And in piano playing, in the life of a pianist, they do that too. One of the things that I have really come to appreciate, and I came to appreciate it again when I started recovering, from my little surgery, because I couldn't move my left arm, so I thought it would be a good idea, just to brush up all the Chopinitas, because there's so much fluidity. And when you do that, when I started to do that, this idea of playing with flexibility. So if I play with a more arch, go back and forth between different ways of using your fingers and different ways of using, you know, flat fingers, curved fingers, arch here, loose here, so that you have, you know, like a repertory of touches. And Chopin was really big about different touches. I'm sure that you know that, as was Liszt. And so when you are playing, I find in my teaching, in my experience teaching, that most of the people here and every year, you guys know what you want to express, and you have strong feelings, but there's stuff that gets in the way, and it just doesn't come out quite right. So that's the other thing, is to have different ways of playing any piece, even if you're never going to play it that way. You know, like, so that you can have more variety of tools. I happen to be right-handed. See how much better this sounds? To make my left hand sound like my right hand, because my right hand is, you know, in my heart line. And is anybody left-handed here? Because if you play, you know, melodies in the left hand just sound so great when you play them, but not for right-handed people. So, you know, these are examples of how one has to work with oneself, you know, to balance. Balance one's body, balance one's interpretation, balance one's you know, vision of how you want a piece to sound. So when we talk of work, I don't think of work when I practice. I think I'm going over, I mean, my mindset is always, well, I'm going over to the piano, I'm going to have a good time now. It's more like a party for me. And I got that from you know, my experience as a dancer, because when I was training, I mean, I loved going to dance class. I don't know that I loved it more than when I go to piano, but for a long time I did love it more, because when you go to dance class to learn how to dance, you don't go to work, you go to dance. And you go to dance not by yourself, you're at least with a couple other people. So, you know, if you don't practice your solo repertoire with somebody else, unfortunately, you're by yourself, and that makes it a lot harder to communicate. So you can, I went through a period actually where when I was studying with Mr. Shubak, I thought to myself, well, what would he say? And then these ideas, I don't know whether they were his, I mean, obviously they weren't his ideas, they were my ideas. And some of them were, you know, a repetition of a lesson. But they would come to me and I would follow this instruction. And I would get myself out of a rut. I would wake up again. So that's the thing. And I would break up my habit. And I would get some new inspiration. Because inspiration comes from inside you. So like, for instance, if you take this etude, which etude? But let's take this one. You know, this is like a trick to play this etude. It has a certain kind of feeling, you know, and I thought to myself when I heard somebody play a colleague of mine so well, I thought, how can they do that, you know, and it feels inspiring. So the one thing that you need to remember to do these kinds of things is you have to kind of loosen your hand. Because if your hand is stiff at the piano, you won't be able to make these little I guess, inventions or aha moments or light bulbs or whatever, because if I sit on my hand, I can't move very well. If I take this, so this always, I wondered why when I was a kid, why is this called a butterfly etude? And then I watched somebody play it and I thought, oh, it's because the hand is like a butterfly, you know, and so then you start to have this little feeling of, you know, but in order to do that, you have to sort of, you know, get on the wings in your imagination of a little butterfly. So, you know, I'm all about, kind of going into these special places and using your imaginations, because you all have really, so far, everybody that I've taught has a really terrific imagination, but you don't always turn it on. So, you know, like when you walk into the practice room, you can either decide to turn the light on, or you can walk in and try in the dark. There's a lot to be said by practicing in the dark, by the way, but you know, either way, you have to acknowledge the fact that if you want to get something done, you have to go on a trip. So the trip includes, how am I going to breathe? Individual. It's not human, it's mechanical, right? If I do. Legato, which we haven't really talked about, because all of these touches are very special and they need to be explored. You know, when you go into a practice room, instead of trying to get it right, it would be really good just to go on an exploration, an adventure, and you won't end up with, okay, I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to hang it on the wall, and every time I play this piece I'm going to try to recreate this picture. That's not what it's about, to really play anything well. Because, you know, if you're taking the repeat, where was I? you know, when you play, I remember hearing this a lot when I was like 9 or 10, and then when I studied with Rosina Levine when I was 12. And all of my early experiences were about, you know, when you play the piano, you need to tell a story. And I used to leave my lessons and think, what? What is this story? Why would I need to tell a story? And it wasn't until many, 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 many years later that I understood that they weren't really talking about, now I'm going to open the door and go down to the mailbox and get the mail and bring the mail back for my mother, or something like that. It's not that kind of a story. They're talking about just letting the sounds weave a trance around you and follow. It's like being seduced by beauty. So when you think of these, you know, whatever pieces you're playing, they were written by people who were going on trips with or without drugs. They were going into the fantasy world, and it is the color and the beauty of the sound, you know, that is intoxicating, and that is the thing that you latch onto. But in order to grab on to these beautiful things and to learn how to, let's say, make more beautiful colors and beautiful nuances, so the keys, my keys to this area were actually a lot from dance, because my whole life has been devoted to learning how to dance at the piano, which means learning how to play with ease and fluency and flexibility. Because if you have flexibility, you can make endless change and endless nuance and endless touches in the area of legato, staccato, different pedaling and everything else. But you have to have, you know, you sort of have to have your body in balance, and you have to understand how the human body works in relationship to this instrument, which is really, you know, it is mechanical, even though it can sound very, very beautiful. It's mechanical. But it's how you go through this point. There's a lot of give here, and there's a lot of flexibility in the key, and there's a lot of flexibility in your arm and in your hand. So all of these, I mean, I have thought for years of kind of making a chart of, okay, if you want to stimulate yourself to try and create a new path, these are some, you know, like sample menus that you can get. There's this combination of approaches and this combination. But I've never really done that, because then that locks you, whoever's going to pick up a sample menu, or a menu of the day, let's say, that's going to, you get locked into that. So if you could say to yourself when you are going to practice, okay, well, let me first change my breath. Let me first change how I'm going to breathe. Then let me change from different way of pedaling. Let me change the touch. Let me change the tempo. Let me change the dynamic. Let me change where I'm sitting. If I sit, let's say, if I sit here and play this, pedal. that you have to be afraid of, but it's sort of what I would call the joys of exploring sound. So the bottom line is you have a body that's very flexible. You have a lot of stuff already that's in your pre-conscious, that's been in there from the time you were little. You're in contact with the world, right? You're all in good health. You have these beautiful pianos. You got a ton of stimulation. The only component missing is like, okay, I'm gonna just be courageous enough to try and do this. The worst that'll happen is you'll go for your next lesson and your teacher, whoever he or she is, like, oh my God, I don't like this. But you know, if you have an extreme reaction, that's great. Because you can go from there. The worst thing is this, I don't know, you know, I don't even know where I am, or I don't know where to go, or it's bland. I mean, it's like when, I'm sure you've eaten something that, you know, has had no taste. It's better to have something that has taste than no taste. And the only way you're going to make things really tasty is you have to have the courage to play with these elements. So I mean, my advice would be don't think about going to the piano to work. Think about going to the piano to have what I call an aha experience. Because you might play something and say, oh, wow, I really like that. Or if you don't like it, then try something else. But I think the more you can throw these things up in the air and play with them, the better. When I was your age, I was telling somebody, I had a whole series of dreams. Actually, I was studying it with Professor Shubak at the time. And I remember when I was playing Melissa and I walked into the lesson, and how are you? Fine. He said, you know, I had this dream last night, and Liszt was talking to me. He said, really? I'll never forget the expression on his face. Well, what did he say? He was so interested. And I said, well, he was talking about how to play repeated notes. Really? Well, what did he say? And so I told him that he told me these 3 ways of playing repeated notes. He said, really? He said, I agree with what he was telling you. I said, really? You know, I mean, so I don't think that I was getting information. I think this, you know, this was I was trying to learn how to play repeated notes better, and I think it was just a dream, and it became crystal clear to me. And I went for a period of months where I had Chopin, I visited Chopin, or he visited me rather, but I actually went and visited Mozart, and you know, all these wonderful keyboardists. I even went and visited Beethoven, but he didn't play anything. And all of this was really interesting, you know, I mean, I woke up, I went around my day, and it was an adventure. So I guess that is what I wanted to do with this class, and next week I think I'm going to make, you know, I haven't sent this email out, but I will. Like, if there's special, I don't want to say special needs, like as though you're handicapped, but if there's special topics or special subjects, we can have a special class. We can have a sign-up sheet, or we can talk about I'm open to talking about any aspect. And by the way, this idea of opening your windows and being more experimental, it really, really will help you in memorizing your music, because the phrasing will be different and the breathing will be different. And memory functions on many levels. It functions on breathing, the tactile, and, you know, the awareness and where you put your body. You have a series of prompts in addition to knowing the form and the name of the piece, right? Okay, we'll continue this. Thank you.